Hi. Oh, that's better. So much better. Hi, lovely people. There we go. I don't even have to shout. Please come along. Grab yourself some. Oh, that's beautiful. Echoey. How? I feel like I'm a pop star. That's better. Please come. Please join us at the chairs. Drinks will still be there afterwards, don't worry, and we'll have a break in the middle where you can refresh yourselves as well. But yeah, welcome to Brighton Pie. Hi, everyone. Lots of new faces, which is excellent. Can we turn off the music? Hold on. There we go. That's a bit better. My name is Laura. I'm your host tonight. I am from a company called Data Cove, along with my colleagues. We've got Jeremy. There we go. And Abby. And we might even have a couple online. I don't know if they're there or not. But you can come and have a chat with us. We run Brighton Pie. We also run Brighton R, because we've got some R coders in the house. But Python is what we're going to be talking about tonight. And it's a really great one tonight because it's going to be a medical special, which is quite lovely. We've got a lovely theme going on tonight. Our two speakers are going to be online. Unfortunately, can't make it here today, but that's okay because we're here and the pizza's here and the beer's here. And we've already had a lovely chat with everyone. And it's so nice to meet you all and to see all those lovely faces again that we have been seeing before. Let's have a look at some slides. I don't even know what's on these. Welcome. That's an easy one, right? We're doing some refreshments and then we've got our two talks, one from Dr. Eleanor, and she's going to be looking at systems biology and blood cancer. Can we cure cancer with code? Oh, that'd be very exciting if that's a yes. And then we've got Sid, who's coming in and talking about behavioral modeling. Now, that's obviously a very difficult thing to do because people are just like extra, aren't they? Yeah, people are just a bit extra. So trying to predict modeling and model behavior, if we can do that, that would be very wow. So that would be excellent. And then we'll have some questions and closing remarks and save the date. Those times don't look very accurate to me, but that's okay. We'll start, we're a little bit late as is. We'll go up to the hour. We'll have a 5-10 minute break where we'll have a comfort break and a refresh of everything and any questions, and then we'll go into the second talk. So we should be finished about, we're around to 8, the drink flows until 8, so please do stay. But yeah, without further ado, oh no, there's a few other things I do need to speak. Please, could I, who wants to come up first? Yay! We've got our lovely Alex from Silicon Brighton, our wonderful sponsors.
Thank you so much. Do I have a clicker? Clicker. Right, hi everyone. How are you? Some of you I know. Put your hand up if you've been to a Silicon Brighton event before. Is that what I say? Silicon? What am I looking? What? Oh, I'm not on the stream. Sorry, I'm too engrossed in all of you. Anyway, sorry, I won't go on. But if you haven't heard of Silicon Brighton before, hi, I'm Alex. I work for Silicon Brighton, and we support around 25 meetup groups across the city around digital and tech. So we've got events like this where we talk about coding, and then we've got events that happen to be about cloud computing and web development in general. And then we also have some stuff that's aimed at founders. So if you're a founder of your own business or anything like that, we have some stuff around people and culture. And also we have a series of leaders events, which we flipping love. I haven't even gone to my first slide yet, have I? Oh, I don't know how to use the clicker, people. Don't judge me, group of room of techies. Here we go. Right. And nothing that we do. So the AV, the drinks, everything that we provide would not be able to happen without these bunch of members that we have. So if your company name's up there, give yourself a pat on the back. If it's not up there, no worries. And if you'd like to get in touch and support the initiative that we have, then drop me an email, drop Grace an email, and we've got like sliding scales of what your contribution can be or not be. But even you just being here really helps the mission of kind of spotlighting Brighton as a tech hub. That's kind of the overall mission. So thank you for that. We've got some upcoming events. We've got Async tomorrow night, which is a web development meetup at Spaces. That's been running for about 12 years, which is amazing. We've been helping them for about 3 years of that. Also another coding PHP next week. That should be really good. Apparently someone really big from the PHP world is going to be at that event. So I don't actually know that myself, but that's what the organizer told me. And then we've got Kotlin the week after, I believe. Yeah, which is going to be fantastic. And we also have some videos on our YouTube around Brighton Kotlin, and that's like the biggest, most popular videos on our YouTube channel is Kotlin. I don't know why that is, but thousands and thousands, which is strange. And we're also looking for event volunteers. So if you would like to have some experience with running events or coming to create some content or anything to do with production, with what we do, it might not be for you, but someone in your network may be keen for some experience in this area, and just get in touch with me. That would be amazing. We've got our next Brighton Pie. Maybe Laura, you should say this. I don't remember what the date is for the next one. 3 months time, next quarter, and that's the QR code. And then the last slide that I have is join our Slack community, which is kind of a space for all of the groups to cross-pollinate. So if you've got any things that you need, like recruitment or anything like that, you can come and post on our Slack channel, and it's really cool. Everyone's really nice. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening to my waffle. Sorry about that. Let me give that to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Next, I'm going to get Rowan up, and he's going to tell you about this beautiful space and a bit of housekeeping.
Yeah, hello, I'm Rowan. So I'm from Barclays Eagle Lab. So I run this lab in Brighton. So those of you who don't know, we are a business incubator and a co-working space. So people can use the people can. It's not an event without a mic glitch, is it? So yeah, people can use the event for the space for co-working, but we're a business incubator, so we're really kind of passionate about helping businesses to grow, scale, and give them the things that they need to kind of succeed, really. So that might be mentoring, funding, access to a range of accelerator programs. We've also got the digital growth grant. So if anyone's working in the digital industry and looking to kind of maybe make a product or build out their skills, we've got loads and loads of programs that really kind of help you to kind of do that and achieve those things you want to do. So yeah, definitely, if you need to speak to me and find out more, I'm here all night. So yeah, a little bit of housekeeping. If there is a fire alarm, we're not expecting one. We just go across the road just out in front of the Joker pub, very convenient place to meet. And then, yeah, basically toilets downstairs. There is an accessible toilet through here, and then help yourself to drinks and enjoy the evening. There we go.
Thank you so much, Rowan. Now, without further ado, yay! I'd like to introduce our first speaker of the night, and that's Dr. Eleanor, and hopefully... Yay! Hi.
Hello. Helps if I unmute myself.
I don't know if you can hear the clapping. Okay, over to you.
Great. Let me just share my slides. Oh, perfect. They've already popped up. Apologies that I can't be with you in person today. I am quite pregnant and quite sleep deprived, so I've been working from home today. So the title of my talk that I wanted to present today is sort of a bit sensationalist, curing cancer with code. I guess the answer, spoiler alert, is no, or at least not yet, but we'll go on to talk about that. So I wanted to give you a quick introduction to who I am. So I was actually born in Brighton. I'm a Sussex girl. I moved away to do my bachelor's degree in biochemistry at the University of Manchester. Then I came back to Sussex to do my master's degree in molecular cell biology. And then I decided Sussex was too expensive, so I moved away again, did my PhD in chemistry. And this is where I first was exposed to code. My PhD was in computational chemistry and biophysics. So I taught myself Python and Bash just because I felt like I needed them. And I then ended up getting offered a job as a postdoc or a research fellow at Brighton Sussex Medical School, where I use a mixture of Python and Julia. So apologies, but there will be some Julia in this talk. Oh yeah, so previously I've done a lot of experimental work. My background is I'm a biologist, I'm a biochemist. My PhD was then very computational, and I want to be in the middle. So that's where I'm very lucky to be with my postdoc. I get to do some experiments and some computational work. So today I'm going to be talking mostly about some work that I recently have published on diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, which is a type of blood cancer. I wanted to share some more recent results at the end, but I've actually had a bug in my code for the last 2 weeks, so haven't been able to produce the results I wanted to, unfortunately, but there should be enough for us to talk about today. So the disease that I'm working on in my postdoc is diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. It's a very common type of blood cancer. And it's very interesting because it's an extremely heterogeneous disease. If you're not familiar with this word, it just means that even in between patients, they'll both walk into a clinic, they'll both get a diagnosis of DLBCL, is how I refer to it, but the disease and the mutations that make up their disease is very, very different. And there's lots of different subtypes where some patients will do much better and some patients will do much worse. So here is just an example of this, that you don't need to worry about the detail of this at all, other than the arrow along the bottom. Each column is a patient and each row corresponds to a mutation if they've got a little coloured in box. So you can see that there's lots of different ways we can cluster patients. So here they're clustered into clusters 1 to 5, but even within those clusters, there are big differences from one patient to the next. Despite this, everybody gets the same treatment. It's a one-size-fits-all approach, and it cures about 60% of patients. The rest have very poor prognosis, and around 1 in 3 DLBCL patients will not survive 5 years after diagnosis. So the current treatments that we have are is an immunochemotherapy regime called R-CHOP. So we have these 3 chemotherapy drugs, this steroid and this antibody. And this hasn't actually changed for over 15 years, despite the fact that it's not great. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not terrible. And in fact, adding the R to R-CHOP was revolutionary. It increased the survival from sort of 45 to less than 50% within over 5 years to about 60%, like I said. And lots of people will say that R-CHOP is pretty good, but I don't think 40% of people not surviving for 5 years is good enough at all. And again, I'm trying not to go too hard on the biology here, because I appreciate that this is an audience full of coding people, but I do need to explain this family of molecules that I'm working on. So I work on a protein called NF-kappa B, and it's part of our normal immune function. It's got roles in inflammation, but when it goes wrong, it does all these terrible things, such as causing metastasis, tumor cell proliferation, evading therapy. And this lines up really well with all of these cancer hallmarks. So NF-kappa B helps cells resist death, keep proliferating when they shouldn't be, evading things, invading and metastasizing, being immortal. So instead of dying when they stop receiving signals, they keep going forever and ever, and hijacking blood supplies. So this is a really important molecule. I say molecule, it's actually not one molecule. We know that NF-kappa B is important in diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, but there's actually a whole bunch of different types of NF-kappa B, and these form dimers, so 2 molecules bind to each other. So there's 15 potential combinations. We have some understanding about some of these subunits. So for example, we know that CREL is important in some types of DLBCL, REL-B might be important in others, but overall, we don't really have much of an understanding. And one thing I like to remember is, even though when I'm doing my work in a Jupyter notebook and it's code on a screen, actually in the patients, this is all happening in a very complicated environment. It's not just cells sitting in a dish or code sitting in a code block. It's actually happening in the context of the so-called tumor microenvironment. So there'll be normal immune cells, healthy cells, interacting with the cancer cells, and the cancer cells will receive signals from these cells, and this complicates the picture further. So to kind of summarize, the complexity of DLBCL is patients have lots and lots of differences between them. NF-kappa B is very complicated, but very important. And we also have to consider the tumor microenvironment. We can't just knock out NF-kappa B with a drug because this is toxic. As I mentioned earlier, it's really important in our normal immune function. We actually have it in every cell in our body. But if we could target the right NF-kappa B in a person who has, for example, too much REL-A, then maybe we can help that patient and have better outcomes. But NF-kappa B is very complicated, as everything in DLBCL is. So it's actually not just one signaling pathway, it's two signaling pathways, a canonical and a non-canonical arm, and these are kind of interconnected, and there's feedback loops. So NF-kappa B degrades its own inhibitors and all sorts of things. And even this simple cartoon representation that I have on the left, we can draw as a much more complicated computer model, which is on the right, where each of these arrows and each of these numbers next to an arrow corresponds to a reaction in the model, which has parameters assigned to it. And basically, we can give it a starting number, and it will do all the maths for us and spit out an answer. But you can start to see that this is far too complicated to understand without the help of computers, because there's so much interconnectivity, and it becomes impossible to predict how changing one parameter or one thing will affect other things without the help of computers. So this is why we need systems biology. So systems biology is, I like this kind of definition of systems biology from the Harvard Medical School website. It's using the tools of mathematics and computation because biology is too complicated for the unaided human brain. And I like to think of systems biology as kind of a cycle where systems biology is not just modeling on its own. It's very much tied to the biology. You have to identify the biological questions. You have to then get the data. You have to feed this into your model. You have to generate hypotheses or predictions, which you can then test, and then that generates more biological questions. I'm sure everyone is going to be much more familiar with computational models than I am, so I'll just gloss over this quite quickly. So the way that we make these models is we take some literature. So this is a paper by my boss where it's just summarizing some of the key systems in cell and in cancer. And then we do some maths. So we write these out, write every reaction out as an ordinary differential equation, which I'll talk about more in a second. And then we write some code to solve it. So, for example, if we take P52, this is a molecule that is chopped up by an enzyme or a protein called Nick. So it's P100 is chopped up into P52. So we could actually write this out as P100 and Nick separately bind together to form a complex. So we have P100 bound to Nick, which is what this colon notation means. And then that turns into P52 and Nick. And each of these arrows has a rate associated with it. And the binding and unbinding of P100 and Nick, that's a reversible process. So we've got a K1 and a K-1, whereas something being chopped up, that's not a reversible process, so it's just a K2. And we can write an equation corresponding to that first section of that schematic, where we have P100 binding to Nick and unbinding. And we can use this to calculate the amount of P100 over time. And it's just a pretty simple equation where we have a binding term and an unbinding term. So these equations are not very complicated. The complexity arises from the fact that there are hundreds and hundreds of them. I'm not going to really talk about this in the interest of time, but basically we can use these models to make some predictions, but we have to have some data to start with. And this was just a weather forecast from a day a while ago. So in order to get the data, this is my one of my very few experimental slides, we use this technique called flow cytometry. This is a really neat technique because you add tags to your cells, which bind to a protein that you're interested in. And these tags have fluorophores on them. So these are activated by lasers. And when you put the cells that have these tags on them through the flow cytometer, it puts them into a single stream of cells. So they feed through one by one, and the lasers shine and the tags fluoresce, and you can detect this. So you get a chart like this one in the bottom right corner, where you can see that there's a population that has high PE, which is one of the tags, but it has low APC, which is another one of the tags. And you can get information about different levels of proteins in this way. So typically, when you do flow cytometry analysis, you collect your data on a flow cytometer. You then export it as a so-called an FCS file. Typically, you'll use something called the Cytoflex software, which is what is the built-in software for the flow cytometer that I use, at least. It's not available on Mac, first problem. Then you select your data. So this is a process called gating, where you only pick the cells that you're interested in, because some of it's going to be rubbish. So you just make sure you're picking the ones you care about. The most commonly used program for this is called Flojo. And then you present your data with whatever plotting software you like. My problem with Flojo is that it costs money and it requires a license, which are not my favorite things. I'm very much in favor of open source. I think science should be for everyone and should be accessible to all. And I think proprietary software is very much against the way that works. It's also powerful, but it can't do everything that I necessarily want it to do. So Simon is my boss. So I said to Simon, "Oh, well, I'm getting a bit annoyed having to borrow this Flojo dongle. Maybe we should consider buying a second one, even though I don't really want to spend money on it." And Simon said, "No, actually, you can code. Just use Python." So I found this Python module called Cytoflow, which is really excellent. And now I do all of my data processing. In fact, everything from after data collection, I do using Jupyter notebooks and Python. And my favorite plotting package is Seaborn. And this is my completely off-topic reminder that Seaborn colorblind palette should be used by everyone, because 1 in 20 people are colorblind. So make sure you're using your colorblind friendly palettes, and Seaborn is pretty good for that. So here are some plots that I've made using my Python pipeline. And all of these are useful in different ways. So I've got some histograms. I can get these kind of neat 3-dimensional scatter plots showing when something's high in different markers. I can make bar plots. I can plot the fold change. But actually, it becomes quite complicated when you're trying to compare different things. When you're trying to compare lots of different proteins across lots of different cell lines. So we came up with this idea that we could collate all our data and standardize it to a Z distribution, which is a type of statistical distribution where the mean is 0 and the standard deviation is 1. And then we plot what we call N of capital B fingerprints. So this is what they look like, again, plotted using my favorite Seaborn colorblind palette. Every DLBCL case has a different fingerprint. So this little orange guy down in the bottom left corner is healthy cells that I've taken from someone's blood. And then the dark orange guy is a patient sample. And then the other 4 are all DLBCL cell lines. So these are cells I've been growing. They originally came from a patient, but they're being maintained and they have been treated in such a way that they will live forever in a dish. And you can see that the healthy cells have very, very distinct, they're very homogeneous and in their expression of both REL-A and REL-B. whereas the cell lines have quite a wide representation of rel B, and the patient sample has a bit of variation in its rel A. So this is a really handy way for us to compare differences between samples whilst maintaining the within sample heterogeneity. This is one of my few Julia slides. I'll try not to plug Julia too much because I'm actually more of a Python person myself, but my boss is very, very keen on Julia. Basically, this is how we set up our models. So the reason that we use Julia is because for simulations such as these, it's much, much faster than Python. It's comparable to Fortran and C. And you can see in this little grid I've got in the bottom left that Julia likes to think it's very, very easy to learn, but it has the advantages of being as fast as Fortran and C. I would say it's not quite so easy as Python. I kind of think of Julia as if Python and MATLAB had a slightly ugly baby, and it's the error messages that you get with Julia are awful to debug, whereas Python error messages, you just type it into Stack Overflow and, oh yeah, second answer, there we go. Julia is not, it's a little bit more of a challenge. But basically you start with some parameter files. So these are going to say what numbers you should start with and what are the reactions that happen between those numbers. And then you'll generate this ODE model file, which is a list of all of those ODE equations I showed earlier. You then plug this into a solver. So we use a Julia module called differential equations.jl. And then you get a plot that looks like this, where you can see how each NF-kappa-B component changes over time. You can use multiple cores to solve lots of cells, and you can tweak each parameter set so it's a little bit different from its neighbor. So in a real experiment, not every cell in the dish is going to have the exact same number of proteins compared to its neighbor. There'll be some variation. So this is a way that we can kind of make it a bit more realistic. And you can do things like rapidly check the effect of changing every parameter. So if you want to get the idea about how a drug treatment might affect these cells, you could turn down a parameter and see what happens to the system. So we can use computers to do years of experiments in just hours. So back to my fingerprints. So on the left, I have my experiment, and then on the right, I've got some simulation data. So this is data generated from that model. So we kind of fed in some data from my experiments, and then this is what the model has spat out, so to speak, in terms of the rel A and the rel B. So those are the two NF-kappa-B proteins. But we can go beyond this. We can predict how DLBCL cells respond to signals. So if you remember at the beginning, I said these cells aren't existing just in the context of cells in a dish. They're in this complex microenvironment. So this is some work done in collaboration with Aaron Pack, who's a PhD student I work with. And we looked at rel A bound to P50, which is one of the most important NF-kappa-B complexes, at least we think, in DLBCL. And what we saw was that across these 4 different populations, the dark blue had the lowest, the dark green had the highest, and then the other 2 were in between. And when we stimulate them, so this is in response to a short stimulus in a simulation, which then triggers some changes, which then the changes fade away after the stimulus is removed. When we stimulate, we expect the blue one to actually be the biggest, even though it starts off without any stimulation as the smallest. And so here is an experiment where we can see actually it really nicely matches up with our model. So without any stimulation, the dark blue is the lowest, the green is the highest, and then the other 2, then yellow, then light blue. And the prediction, when we add the stimulus, the dark blue is the only one that really does anything. Actually, yes, that's what I also see in the lab. that when we add the stimulus, the dark blue is the only one that goes up and everything else sort of stays the same. So I appreciate this has not been super duper Python-y, but hopefully it's been interesting nonetheless. So the current treatments of DLBCL are not good enough in our opinion. We know NF-κB is really important, but it's very difficult to understand the NF-κB signaling without computers to help. So we need systems biology. We've seen that every DLBCL patient or case has a different NF-κB fingerprint, and from the simulations, we can predict changes in NF-κB in response to stimuli. Tested these predictions in the lab, and I guess to kind of come back to when I said at the beginning, the title of Curing Cancer with Code, no, not yet. But the idea for this work is that we're working towards a future in which different patients could be treated with different NF-κB subunit specific drugs based on their fingerprints, and we could predict that using models. So kind of, I guess the take-home message, at least in my opinion, is in DLBCL, personalised medicine is the way forward, and computer modelling is a really important part of that. These are all of the people who have helped me with this work. So my boss, Dr. Simon Mitchell, is the tool guy in the middle, and then the Pepper team and Mitchell team as well. And Dr. John Jones is our clinical collaborator. So that's how I get my hands on chunks of people's neck that they've donated. And I'm funded by UKRI. Yeah, thanks so much for listening.
Wow, that was like really exciting, really motivating. Like, oh my goodness, it's like possible, or will be in future. The fact that you're kind of even realizing that it's possible, that it, that excites me. That's really awesome to think about. Has anyone got any questions in the audience? Ah, lovely. Right, we're going to give you your very own mic, and my lovely assistant, who just saw the letter R 3 times in that code. And he got very excited because he codes an R. It was just like, yeah, you are. Lincoln.
Hello. Can I ask a non-Python question?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you don't like about Julia?
I knew there'd be a Julia person in the audience who would say this. Why does it count from 1, man? Like, it shouldn't. It should count from 0.
Because that's how matrices work in maths. It makes
sense. I think I'm just so Python is what I learned to start with, and I found there's lots of little things that are annoyingly different, and it will take me a while when I'm writing in Julia versus in Python. So, like for example, I'll write elif instead of else if, and the way that like if statements work are slightly different. Instead of having colons, you have to write end, and all these little things that they just annoy me. My boss, so I'm 2 years into my postdoc now, and for the first year of my postdoc, I was very much like, no, I don't want to use Julia, I want to use Python. Don't make me use it. And for the last year, I've been using a lot more Julia, and as I use it more, I like it more, is what I'll say. But I think I'm still Team Python for now.
Yay.
You happy with that, Lincoln?
Just curious. Any other questions? A lot of it probably went over our heads. I don't know about the rest of you. It was very lovely to hear. Yes.
Yeah, again, a non-coding question from a non-expert, but just interested in that final bit in terms of the outputs and the personalized medicine. Can you elaborate in terms of what that means to Joe blogs or Josephine blogs?
Yeah, so one of my colleagues is doing some really amazing stuff at the moment, all entirely in Julia, no Python at all, where he's taking real mutational data from patients and is able to predict from simulations how long that patient will survive, which is kind of terrifying. But it's very much becoming a thing that in our group that we're starting to think about, okay, what specific mutations can we model that real patients will have? And then once we've made it, so there's a concept of like digital twins in medicine, where you could go to the doctor, you could have some blood taken or a biopsy, and you could have your digital twin made. So this is a model that represents you. And then the doctor could run some simulations to test different drugs and say, oh, yes, this drug will work best for you based on this model. And then you'd get that drug. I think we're still quite a way off, but perhaps not as far off as it might seem, because it sounds very futuristic, but actually the work is happening behind the scenes for that sort of thing. So yeah, I guess for Joe Blogs would go to the doctor, have some blood taken, and then the doctor would run some simulations and predict which medicine would be best for them based on some real data.
Oh, that's very exciting. We've got another one here.
So you used the word pipeline earlier, which to me very much means delivery pipelines and automation and all this sort of stuff. And it strikes me that there's a lot of things in what you're doing that you're probably doing with a lot of manual steps that could be automated, which would then, exactly like you were saying with the digital twin, that automation of here's the blood test, you do the science on it, the results come in, and then it gets fed into your Python bits and your Julia bits and delivered to your output, etc. Are you doing much around that, or is that something that, I mean, you guys, I guess, is based on the science?
Yeah, so I try and automate as much of my work as I can, because I end up running so many different cell lines and patient samples that it makes sense to not have to change my code a million times. With the flow cytometry analysis, some of it is a bit of kind of an art, to work out which data to exclude. I did play around with the idea of automating that using some sort of like peak recognition stuff, but decided it probably wasn't worth it at that time based on how much time it would take me to implement. But yeah, I mean, I think the ideal goal for a lot of my research would be for it to be kind of packaged up neatly into a tool that other blood cancer researchers could use, could access on the web, and could input data in, and it would just do it all for them. So that is something that we do consider. Obviously, I am not a software engineer. I'm a biochemist who likes to code. So it's not my day job to make these things beyond my own use, but I do try and automate as much as possible, just because I use things so often.
Brilliant. Oh, questions online, of course. Can we do? Yeah. Do you want to read it out? I can read it out. Yeah. Hold on. Come here. Who we got? Right, from Jason, is there any indication of how the NF-κB fingerprint might influence the response to drug treatment? Was that what that... Hi, Jeremy. So, sorry, is there any indication of how the NF-κB fingerprint might influence the response to drug treatment?
I don't have an answer for that yet, because this work was actually only finished and published earlier at the beginning of June. But that's something that we're working on at the moment, where if we treat different DLBCL cases which have different fingerprints with different drugs, we're trying to understand how things change. So I think the answer is yes. And there's a thought experiment that I've had ever since we first started making these fingerprints, where if you have a case where the fingerprint is over here, and you have a case where the fingerprint's over here, and this guy responds to a drug and this guy doesn't, if you can treat this guy or whichever one doesn't respond, with something that shifts its fingerprint a little bit, does it then start responding? That's something that we're thinking about as well. So I don't know the answer to it at the moment, but hopefully I will over the next few months. Sorry, that's not a very satisfactory answer.
No, that's awesome. Thank you. The fact that you're even like investigating this is all very exciting. Just a really quick question for me: was that what the, you know how you were kind of putting an electric shock into the cells? I don't know what you were doing. You know, the picture and had a lightning bolt. Is that you trying to get rid of the cancer, basically?
So this is to kind of mimic what would happen in the body. So in the body, in that tumor microenvironment I mentioned, things are constantly receiving different signals. So that little lightning bolt represented, oh, something's just bound to our cell and it's activated it. So it's not us trying to get rid of it, it's kind of activating them, which is obviously not good in terms of the cancer. In terms of a person with cancer, their cancer is being activated and that's giving it all sorts of signals, but that's what's happening in reality. So we need to be able to understand it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. A big round of applause for Dr. Eleanor. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We will have a 2-3 minute little comfort break really, really quickly. You were so zoomy in this today. And then we will come back and Sid has got another talk for us. We'll try and make it super quick because I don't want to keep you super late, although the rain has now stopped. So it's good to be inside in the weather. But yeah, let's have a couple of breaks. There's still drinks. Is there still pizza? Maybe, who knows? But yeah.
Hello, Sid. It's Chris on the sound.
Hi, Chris.
If I do this, can you hear me?
I can hear now. I
Okay,
can hear you now.
perfect.
Yeah.
You sound very clear to me.
Mm-hmm.
My only issue is there's a lot of light behind you. Is it possible to close a curtain?
Yeah. Let me try. Yeah.
Okay, that looks fantastic.
Is this okay or?
That looks really good.
Okay.
There's still one bit right by the sort of left of your head.
That's my aura actually.
But if you can't do anything, then we can work with this. It's
yeah,
fine.
let me try again. Yeah.
No problem.
Ah.
That's perfect. That's perfect now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can I ask if you've got any slides?
Yes, I do have slides.
Okay, so do you see a button at the bottom that says present?
Yeah.
And then there should be an option to share your screen.
Yeah, I can share my screen and I'll just share entire screen.
Lovely. And I can, from here, put them in and out.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have them ready to go, I'll just pop them in when you start. Okay, I think we're all ready to go on my end, so it'll be obvious once we started again.
Okay.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Hi, Sid. How are you doing? Can he hear? He can't hear you.
Hi, is that Laura?
How are you? I'm here.
Hi.
We'll get you started if you're ready.
Sure.
Thumbs up.
Yeah. I'll need to stop at around 7:45. I don't know, Laura. Did you hear that or not? No, I guess not.
Again, we're all good to go.
Right. Oh, we've got a few new faces at the front. Everyone's getting a bit more confident now. Is that? Have you not? Or were you always sitting there? I was looking here. Oh, that's so bad. I just didn't look this direction. So very exciting talk. We're hearing all about behavioral modeling. I'm not going to talk too much because we're already running a bit late. So let's jump straight in. Hi, Sid. How are you?
Hi, Laura. Hello, guys. Are you able to see my screen? I'm sharing my slides. Oh, can't hear anything. Oops.
I think if I do this, you can hear me more clearly. We've lost your slides, but we did have them before.
Okay. Let me try again.
If you can press present again, we can get them back.
Yeah. Do you have them?
Yeah. And so you just need to open them full screen, I think.
Yeah. Can you see them?
Yes. Behavior modeling with.
Yeah. If I do a presentation, slideshow, can you still hear me?
Yes, that looks
okay.
and
That's
sounds
great.
perfect.
Okay. Perfect. So I guess I'm okay to start. So thank you so much, Chris, Laura, and thanks for everyone for attending. Sorry I couldn't come in person, but it was good to see the audience there. I'll be presenting on behavioral modeling with machine learning, or more like the challenges that we've had with modeling customer behavior with machine learning. So I'm the director for data ops and data science at IGT iLottery. So what we do is we operate lottery services for multiple state governments in the US, Europe, Asia, all over the world. And so lotteries, you might imagine as tickets that you get in the shops, but that's not the only form of lottery. Lotteries is also played online. There's also games. So it's not lottery is not just about the one ticket that you get and you win millions of dollars, but it's also small games. So that's what we offer, and in that we are trying to improve the customer engagement. How can we improve the enjoyment that a customer can get from playing games? How can we bundle our products, and what is it that what is it that motivates people to play a lottery and other things? So in that, we are trying to understand how we can apply data science and machine learning to understand what people are actually looking for. Now, I'll start with an exercise. So room full of very smart people. I guess if I ask a question, you've already calculated 2 + 2 is 4. So now, how about this one, which is slightly more complex? But yeah, very smart people, probably some of you have already have an answer in your mind. So what this I wanted to just demonstrate is that how our brains work. So we have something called as System 1 and System 2. So Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize in behavioral economics, so classified the way we think and way we make decisions into as brain operates as System 1 and System 2. System 1 is the one that is fast, subconscious. So when you saw the 2 + 2, that is when your System 1 activated, and it in a very quick decision. It was something that was you could have done it subconsciously, very automatic. You easy to make your everyday decisions. Whereas System 2, it's a bit slow. It's more conscious. You need to make a bit more effort. So when you wanted to evaluate the second equation, 17/24, you had to make a little bit of effort. So you needed to engage your System 2. That's when you use to make complex decisions, but it is more reliable. To think of this, psychologist Jonathan Haidt has the analogy of rider and the elephant. So here, elephant is the System 1. It's quick. It's your the brain that has evolved over to survive, and the rider is the one that is the more cognitive, the calculating part of your brain. Now, the rider thinks that it's the one that is riding the elephant, but or making or directing the elephant, but it's actually the elephant which is driving most of our decision making and the way we think. Now, there are a lot of behavioral traits that influence how we make decisions. Some of them that are listed over here are like reactants. Reactants, which means we just do something sometimes because it's not someone asked not to do. Possibility effect is when we disproportionately value the possibility of winning something. Anchoring effect, when quite often this is used in negotiations and something like a salary negotiation, where you anchor to a point and then your choices are the answers are based due to the anchor. Subconscious nudges and priming. So sometimes marketing will have subconscious nudges for you to direct you to buy a specific product. Loss aversion, we are more prone to avoid losses rather than an equivalent profit. Hedonic treadmill, so we have a level of happiness. We get very happy, and then that becomes our standard, and then again we need some other additional stimulus to be happy. Or if we get too sad, after some time we come back to our stable level of happiness. Right turning retail, so quite often in shops, uh, the shops will, most people turn right first, and that's why a lot in many shops that you will visit, you will see that a lot of the product placement is on the right. So how can we use this in decision making? So we have data scientists and economists. Now economists believe that people are rational. Traditional economics and traditional data science will understand that people have a rational. They can understand data, and they can make decisions with all the information that they have. But in reality, people are quite irrational. Sometimes it's very difficult to understand the decisions that uh, someone will make. And that's what, so data that will give you what is happening historically, but it's not informing us why is it happening. So that's what to understand behavior and why people make certain decisions. It's very important to understand psychology and what could be the reasons behind people making decisions. So some of the behaviors that we discussed, I'll just give a more explanation of what we are looking into. So reactants. So we often do things just because someone tells us not to do. In many cases, is something like motivation for gambling, or someone in our lives has told us not to gamble. So that piques the interest. Okay, why should I do that? And a good example of that is in vaping, for example. Vaping is something that is not advised, but you might see that a lot of teenagers are nowadays having vaping. It's quite a prevalent problem. So sometimes we want to do just because someone has said not to do. I think if we start having old people or middle-aged people starting vaping, probably it will be less attractive. Possibility effect. So this is when we highly we are more drawn to some unlikely events. To give you an example, in this Dishum restaurant in London, if you've been to, for their regular customers, they have something called as a keyring. So if you give them a keyring between on weekdays before 6 p.m., if you go, they give you a keyring and they'll give you a die. Six-sided die, and if you roll a die and the die you score 6, then your bill is free, so you don't have to pay. So it's now, as an economist, that is a 16.66% discount, 1/6 the probability, and so that's about 16.66% discount. But for a human mind, getting a meal for free by the roll of dice is a completely different thing. It's not the 16.6% discount, and that's what it excites a lot of people to take that as a chance. Anchoring effect. So that's when we see one number and then immediately we start making decisions based on the number that we have anchored against. So as an example, school children were given the first equation, 8, 7, 6, 5 by 4. And other set of students were given the same equation, but the other way around. And because the first equation started with a higher number, that batch came up with an estimated figure which was much higher up, I think 2000 something, whereas the second batch, where the numbers were from 1 to 8, that came up with an answer which was significantly lower. I think it was in the 700s or something. So studies show that in time constraints, there was obviously a time constraint which was mentioned for the students. People will extrapolate the number based on the anchor that they've seen. So when you start with 8, you immediately start thinking that it's going to be a higher number. Whereas if you start with a smaller number, our brains start thinking about a lower answer. And this is subconscious nudges. So if you've ever been to Schiphol Airport, or some of the airports. So what they did was the toilet cleaners, they had a very challenge with cleaning male toilets, spending a lot of time because there was a lot of people were not pointing correctly. And so what they did is someone suggested that, hey, let's put a fly in the toilet in the men's urinal. I don't know if you have seen such urinals. They are quite in many other places, although this one is from Schiphol Airport. And so what it did is it reduced the spillage on the floor, and it reduced the effort or the time needed by the toilet cleaners to actually clean. So just putting an image of a fly in the urinal actually reduced the effort and time needed to clean the toilets. So this is like a subconscious nudge, and actually marketing uses some of these quite a lot. An example of this is decoy selling. I don't think I'll be able to play that video and the audio, but I'll give you an example of what this was. So The Economist had subscriptions, and oops. I don't think you'll hear the audio, so I'll just let you know what is the effect. So when Economist had created three choices, one was the Economist subscription for only print and web subscription, an only print subscription, and an economist.com subscription. Now people found it sort of confusing to compare multiple choices. So it was interesting that when they put a decoy print only, it doesn't make any sense. There's a print only subscription, and there's a print and web subscription for $125 and $125, and there is an economist.com subscription only, which is a web only, which is $60. So when just by adding this subscription as an option, the best subscription or the best choice for 84% of people was the print and web subscription, which was $125. In absence of this print subscription, the best choice or the most likely choice that people chose was the economic.com subscription or the web subscription. So just by having as an option, which didn't have any value in itself, but it increased the probability that people buying a print and a web subscription, because people could compare. Okay, I'm not comparing my a digital only or a print only, but I'm going to get a bundle. So that's how we can design choice architecture based on the behaviors that we have. Loss aversion. So many of you must have already heard of loss aversion, and it's actually not a bias. I mean, it is bias, but it's not a bias. We have evolved to avoid losses. So as an example, if four people start with $100, 100 pounds each, and tossing a coin, heads wins 50%, tails lose 40%. As we know, 50%, flipping a coin over a point of time, I'm always going to make a profit, because I'm going to throw half heads, and I'm going to make a 10% profit on that. So let's see what happens if four people start. So there's two people throw heads, and they get 150, whereas two people throw tails, they get 60 and 60 with a loss of 40%. So starting with $100 each, which means investing $400 each overall, the total money pot is now $420. So overall, there's a increase in the value. Now, if we throw the coins again, as the first guy is two heads, he's at 225 second, and the third guy's head and tail at 90 pounds, and the fourth person, due to two tails, is 36 at 36 pounds. Now, although an economist or a mathematician would say, no, you need to continue, keep throwing throwing a coin, because as probability says, you're going to start making profits. But as a human mind, the person who's had two tails is going to exit the game, because the loss seems quite quite a lot, and that's what our brains will avoid losses and try to not engage in a game. So this is when we are trying to reduce what our minds are trying to do is reduce variance. I mean, bias variance trade-off in machine learning. It's also there in our brains. We are not we don't significantly what are called biases are more like human brains are trying to reduce the variance. We want a bit more consistency that we can expect. Now, a hedonic treadmill, so where we go, something makes us happy, and then we stick there. We stay in that happy mode, but at some point, then that becomes our expected level of happiness, and then we come back to our stable happiness level. So, good things happen, bad things happen, but we have a stable level of happiness. And so, as you've seen, there's a lot of more behavioral traits, and they can be quite confounding. Is there a way to model these? So there are some models, not machine learning models, but models proposed that could to understand how human behavior can be modeled. So one of them is Kano model. So this was proposed by Dr. Noriaki Kano, who is a professor at the Tokyo University, who mentions features that are in your product. How much are they valued by customers versus how much some of the features which are not valued. And how some features which are delighters at the beginning might become a basic need. A great example is your mobile phones that unlock just by face. And if now earlier it was delighter, now it's become a basic need. A good example of features. I mean, Kindle. Most of us, when we had started with Kindle, we thought we're never going to have books, but books actually have another purpose as well. So books have a purpose of being a gift. You can stock your shelves behind your walls with books. You can't do that with Kindle. So there was a value or a feature of books which was not evident, but Kindle, having Kindle, we realized that, okay, we actually do need books, and books have actually, we sell more books nowadays than we used to do before Kindle. Another model is the scarf model. So what by David Rock. So what he says is that humans are always evaluating everything as a reward or threat. So anything that we see, our brains are always trying to understand, hey, is it something good for me or is it something bad for us? And the scarf model, which means we are trying to understand, maintain status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So there is this capuchin monkey fairness experiment. It's a very famous experiment. I think many of you might have seen it. There's two monkeys. One monkey gets um, um, a cucumber, and the other monkey gets a grape for the same work. Initially, both of them are happy to do their job, and when the one monkey sees the other one getting grape rather than cucumber, it starts getting understand that it's not fair, and they want something else that someone else has. Okay, so modeling behavior is very hard because every person is unique and with a variety of interests. We want to help people what they want, even when they are not sure exactly what they want. So when people are logging into lottery portal, they're trying to play game or just for entertainment, we're not sure, or they're not sure what exactly they want, and we want to see how we can give them the suggestions that they want. Things are non-stationary, very context dependent, mood dependent. The games or the things that you would watch in the morning versus what during the day, or versus in the evening, or when you're on a weekday or a weekend, would be completely different. We have a large data sets, but very small data per player. There's cold start problems everywhere. So new players being added, new games being added. And more than just accuracy, we also need to ensure that we offer diversity, new games, freshness, and fairness, avoiding feedback loops, that the recommendations that we offer, and then person uses those recommendations, and then we just make those. So modeling behavior is quite hard, and just not in our business, but in many cases. One of the biggest challenges for autonomous driving is going to be understanding human behavior and the way humans will react when we have autonomous cars driving on the roads. So MIT researchers have been trying to solve this problem, and they are coming up with a relatively simpler solution to see how they can model human behavior. So they try to break this multi-agent problem into smaller pieces to tackle each one individually. So what the method, they are calling it as M2I. So what they're doing is they're taking a complex set of decisions that need to be made by the car to into smaller, like yielding to a jaywalker, yielding to other vehicles, yielding with direction failure, merging into crowded traffic and other things. And how do they how what the overall model it does is it has an influencer model that does a marginal prediction, and then that marginal prediction goes into the conditional predictor, which is the reactor, and then that gives an n by n joint samples, and then a sample is selected that gives you samples of what would be the possible outcomes based on the conditions that have happened. So breaking a bigger problem into smaller problems and having the conditional probabilities of what a person would do in case of the other situation happening. So that is one way that we are trying to see how we can model customer behavior by breaking it into smaller problems. So one of our like any business, one of our goals is how to optimize customer lifetime value. So how to engage players better, how to keep them for longer, and how to give them the best suggestions. So breaking that problem into player engagement, how can we engage our players by giving them the best or the most likely suggestions that would make them happy. How to predict and departure, how to see customer might be churning or might be disengaged, and how can we try to drive that engagement. Personalization, so creating personas and then segments that would help us to deliver the right content to the right players, and also identifying anomalies and any fraud or any problematic behavior. So some of the behaviors would be if we model, we might be able to engage our players for longer and also increase the customer lifetime value. It's not going through all, but we might be able to take a look at some of the problems. The game players, there was not us, but I think there's a very famous game called World of Warcraft, and so they try to analyze the personalities of some of the players who play. And so they identified, they classified players into achievers, explorers, socializers, killers. So achievers were playing just to earn points. It's just like something on a Stack Overflow. Some people are very helpful, want to help, and there's explorers who prefer to know the entire, prefer to explore the various parts of the game. Socializers want to play with different players, and killers, they just want to quite aggressively play in the game. They also try to identify which players can play with, because it's multiplayer game, which players can play along with each other. They had a very relatively simpler heuristic-based decision tree to identify or classify the players into various personas. One of the things that we are working on is obviously building a great recommendation engine. So we have landing pages for games, and we want to ensure that we are able to, for every player, we're able to offer a great recommendation of the games that they would be able to play, something like Netflix or YouTube. So a very popular or the workhorse of recommendation engines is the collaborating filtering. So you must have so you have on x-axis the various games that we have, and on y-axis the number of all the players that are playing. So it captures the interaction of a player playing a game and the number of times that they've played and the number of games that we have. So that gives you the interaction matrix. It will be a very sparse matrix. And then you create two dense matrices of from that to for the users and the items, and then you model that to identify what is the this matrix factorization matrix that you can identify for uh, collaborative filtering. Now there are other content-based models. The collaborative filtering model is based only on the interactions that you would have, but it will miss on the similarity between games. So if there's multiple games which are similar or the characteristics, so you might miss out on that. So content-based models would be working on if a player has played game 1 and game 2, and game 3 is similar to game 1, then I'll just recommend game 3. So this is more like a model for every single player, and so this captures more of the interrelationship between games, how similar they are, how different they are, but would miss out on the interaction, which is the gameplay behavior that we see from other players. And so then there are hybrid models. So hybrid models use latent vectors and the item latent vectors. So that will be, instead of having a specific per player, you would have the characteristics of players, and you would use them and the characteristics of the game to model that, and that would give you slightly denser matrix. And again, you do the same, which is matrix factorization. And because this is Python, and what we had been using was one of the matrix factorization techniques called Light FM, which does the hybrid modeling. Now, so this was the traditional way in which we had been developing the recommendation engine, but we need to evolve that because now we have much more richer information with which we are able to understand customers a bit more better. So how we're trying to evolve this is we now have contextual event data. So the impressions, the games that a player has played, the interactions that he's had, like them, the amount of time that they have played, the amount of the various teams that they've played, other things, and then contextual data, which is the devices that they've used, the time and date, or rather the time of the day or the day of the week that they've played, the location. So games might be different for different locations, and then also the game data, so features of the games, and profile settings based on the profile settings that the user has set. So all these information we want to use into our recommendation engine, and so we are evolving into how can we use contextual bandits into the modeling of our recommendation engine. Some of the things that we need to control for is causality. So correlation will not be causality. Just because there is a lot of people are playing a specific game doesn't mean that the game is really nice. There could be some reasons. This is an example from spurious correlations. So what you see is a very highly correlated data between people who drowned after falling out of fishing boat versus marriage rate in Kentucky. Now I think it's this data which shows high correlation actually has no relation to each other. Although I'm married, and some people might agree that people drowning and marriage rate might be actually have some reason for correlation. And then we also need to control for feedback loops. So feedback loops is if we because we've made a recommendation, the player has played the game, and that becomes the data that goes into our model, into our training data for our model. Again, we make the same recommendation, so it becomes into a closed loop. It's something like on YouTube, you watch a specific genre and video, and then you keep getting recommendations of the same genre, and sometimes, so we need to add some freshness to that. Open loop is when if the user is able to search games and search the games by specific category or something, or we are trying to add how can we add some randomness into the recommendations that we make. So there's quite a lot of things that we need to improve into our recommendation engine so that we can understand the customer's behavior and understand how we can model that. And I'm coming towards the end of my slides. So we are trying to see how we can offer, make lottery games offer happiness with our games, and how we can engage players better by giving them a smaller happiness, and it's being interested in the big things while being happy with the small things in life. So that was me. I hope I didn't rush that through.
That was excellent. Thank you, Sid. As a gamer, I'm very much would like to think I'm in control of what I play, but obviously not. I have no idea. Now I'm going to have to go back and kind of analyze that. Do you have time for maybe one or two quick questions, Sid?
One question, maybe.
One question. Oh, it's got to be a good one. Who thinks they've got a really good question? Oh, everyone's now scared. Go on, Jeremy.
Just touching on that last.
Mhm.
Hang on, wait for the camera. Touching on that last question, because I did a bit of research, it's going years back. Do you think that there is a link between lotteries and happiness?
Wow, that's a very philosophical question. Lotteries. So what? So what I've been. So before lottery, I used to work in insurance, and what I've realized actually is that insurance and lottery is actually, a lot of people will not believe it, but insurance and lottery is actually exactly the same business, upside down. So while lottery is selling you hope, insurance is selling you the safety net. So if while insurance gives you the comfort that okay, if I do something, if something goes wrong, I will be in the safety net. Lottery gives you that hope. So it's not just the winning, but also the hope that gives happiness to many people, and the possibility. So I would say that that is what the and lottery is not just getting the $1 million lottery. There's also smaller wins that many people get. So it's the smaller happinesses that we want to hope, and happiness that we want to deliver.
And the numbers correlate too. From the research I did many years ago, around the world, lotteries, or the more money spent on lotteries, the happier people were in a country. So there you go.
There we go. Thank you
Okay.
ever so
All
much,
right.
Sid.
Thank you.
That was absolutely fantastic. Well done.
Thank you.
Perfect. Have a good night, everybody.